What would you do if the king of the jungle appeared in the most unexpected place? Your workplace. Not behind bars in a zoo, not in the depths of a jungle, but standing right in front of you, wounded and vulnerable, as if asking for help. Would you freeze in fear, or would you find the courage to act? The quiet hum of machines filled the hospital's dimly lit corridors that night. The ER was unusually calm for a Saturday, and Nurse Emily Miller had just begun her night shift. She had no idea that her world was about to change forever. As the clock struck midnight, a sound like thunder rolled through the entrance. Emily's heart stopped. It wasn't the sound of heavy boots or rolling gurneys. It was a roar. A deep, guttural, unmistakable roar that sent a chill down her spine. "What on earth?" she whispered, her hands trembling as she clutched her clipboard. The security alarms blared, red lights flashing across the walls. Before she could react, a young orderly came sprinting down the hall, his face pale as a ghost. "You have to see this," he panted, pointing toward the main entrance. It's a lion." And Emily froze. "A lion? Here? Are you joking?" The orderly's wide eyes told her this was no joke. Against every instinct screaming at her to stay put, Emily forced herself to walk toward the entrance. Each step felt heavier than the last, her mind racing with questions. Why would a lion be here? How did it even get in? And, perhaps most terrifying of all, what did it want? When she reached the entrance, the sight that met her eyes would be etched into her memory forever. There, standing in the middle of the hospital's polished marble floor, was a magnificent African lion. Its golden mane was matted with blood, and its piercing amber eyes scanned the room. It wasn't growling or pacing. It wasn't hunting. It was standing perfectly still, its massive body swaying slightly, as if it was on the brink of collapse. For a moment, no one moved. The security team stood frozen, unsure whether to approach or flee. Patients peeked cautiously from behind doors, whispering in hushed tones. And then it happened. The lion took a slow, deliberate step forward. Its massive paw left a crimson stain on the floor, and it let out a low, rumbling growl, not of aggression, but of pain. Emily's breath hitched. She didn't see a predator. She saw a creature in need. "Someone call animal control," a voice shouted from the crowd. "No." Emily's voice rang out, surprising even herself. She stepped forward, her instincts as a nurse overriding her fear. "We can't wait for them. It's hurt. If we don't do something, it'll die right here." The room fell silent. All eyes were on her as she approached the lion, one cautious step at a time. "Emily, what are you doing? Are you insane?" a colleague hissed. She didn't answer. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she moved closer. The lion's eyes locked onto hers, and for a brief moment the world around them disappeared. In its gaze, she saw something she never expected: plea, trust, and desperation. It was as if the lion knew she could help. Kneeling down, Emily extended her hand, her voice soft and soothing. "It's okay, big guy. We're going to help you. I promise." The lion swayed again, then let out a soft, almost pitiful whimper. It collapsed onto the floor with a heavy thud, its breathing shallow. Emily's heart broke. She turned to the stunned crowd behind her. "We need supplies. Gauze, antiseptic, and a stretcher. Now." For a moment no one moved. Then, as if her courage was contagious, the staff sprang into action. As they worked to save the life of a creature that had no place being in a hospital, one question loomed over them all: how had this lion found its way here? And why? The answer, they would soon discover, was more extraordinary than anything they could have imagined. As Emily knelt beside the lion, the enormity of what she was doing hit her like a wave. A creature so powerful, so majestic, lay vulnerable at her feet. The deep gashes across its golden fur oozed blood, and every shallow breath it took seemed like an enormous effort. But Emily's hands didn't tremble. Not anymore. Her instincts had kicked in, pushing aside the fear that gripped everyone else in the room. "Emily, step back," A security guard shouted, his voice laced with panic. He held a baton in one hand and a taser in the other, his eyes darting nervously between the lion and the nurse. I said no. Emily shot back, her voice firm but calm. If we frighten it, it might lash out. Let me handle this. The guard hesitated, but there was something about Emily's composure that made him lower his weapons. For a moment, the only sounds were the lion's labored breaths and the distant murmur of hospital activity. Emily gently reached for her stethoscope, realizing how absurd it felt to use such a tool on a lion. But what choice did she have? She pressed the cold metal against its chest, listening for a heartbeat. It was there, faint, irregular, but alive. "Good boy," she murmured, her voice soft and soothing. "You're still fighting. Just hold on a little longer, Ba." The lion's ear twitched slightly at her voice, a subtle sign that it was aware of her presence. It didn't growl, didn't flinch, it trusted her. Behind her, a small team of nurses and an orderly arrived, their arms loaded with medical supplies. They exchanged nervous glances, none of them daring to step closer. "Set everything down here," Emily instructed, motioning to the floor beside her. "I'll take care of it." The others obeyed, retreating quickly as though the lion might spring to life at any moment. But Emily stayed. Her every movement was careful, deliberate. She dabbed antiseptic onto the lion's wounds, wincing at the sight of torn flesh and embedded thorns. "What happened to you?" she whispered, her mind racing with possibilities. Had it been attacked? Was it lost? Or was there some other, deeper reason it had come here? Her hands moved methodically, cleaning the gashes and applying pressure to slow the bleeding. As she worked, the lion let out a low, rumbling sigh, almost like a groan of relief. From the corner of her eye, Emily noticed the hospital administrator approaching, his face a mixture of disbelief and anger. "What is going on here?" he demanded, his voice booming. "Why is there a wild animal in my hospital?" "It's hurt," Emily replied without looking up. "I'm trying to save its life." "This is a hospital, not a wildlife sanctuary," the administrator snapped. "Get animal control here immediately before someone gets killed." Emily finally turned to face him, her eyes blazing. "This lion came to us for help. It could have gone anywhere, but it chose here. Doesn't that mean something?" The administrator faltered, caught off guard by her conviction. Before he could respond, the lion let out a soft, guttural sound that silenced the entire room. It wasn't a growl. It was something gentler, almost like a moan of gratitude. Emily turned back to the lion, her determination renewed. "It means something to me," she whispered. "And that's enough." As she continued working, the staff around her began to shift. The fear in their eyes gave way to something else. Admiration, inspired by her bravery. A few of them even stepped closer to assist. Together, they worked in silence, bound by an unspoken understanding. This wasn't just about saving an animal's life. It was about compassion, about rising above fear and doubt. By the time they finished stabilizing the lion, dawn was breaking. Pale sunlight filtered through the hospital windows, casting a golden glow over the creature that had brought them all together. For a brief moment, Emily allowed herself to breathe. But as she looked into the lion's eyes, she couldn't shake the feeling that their story was far from over. What had brought it here? And what message was it trying to convey? As the morning light poured into the hospital lobby, Emily sat back on her heels, exhaustion tugging at her every muscle. The lion, now bandaged and breathing more steadily, seemed calmer. Its amber eyes, once filled with pain, now held a quiet depth, an unspoken connection that Emily couldn't quite explain. The hospital buzzed with muted whispers. Patients peered from doorways, and staff huddled in corners, casting glances toward the unexpected visitor. Despite the commotion, a strange sense of peace settled over the room. It was as though everyone, for reasons they couldn't articulate, understood that something extraordinary was unfolding. Emily brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, her gaze never leaving the lion. "Why here?" she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. "Why us?" The creature blinked slowly, its massive chest rising and falling in rhythm. It didn't answer, of course, but its presence seemed to speak volumes. As if on cue, a small boy approached cautiously, his hospital gown hanging loosely over his thin frame. "Is it going to be okay?" he asked, his voice trembling with both fear and wonder. Emily smiled gently, beckoning him closer. "I think so," she said. "He's a fighter, just like you." The boy hesitated, then stepped forward, his eyes wide as he stared at the lion. The creature turned its head slightly, acknowledging the child with a soft rumble. The boy giggled, his fear melting into awe. In that moment, Emily felt the weight of the night lift. The lion wasn't just a symbol of strength. It was a reminder of resilience, of the unyielding will to survive against all odds. As the boy sat beside the lion, his tiny hand brushing against its paw, Emily realized something profound. This wasn't just an injured animal seeking refuge. It was a silent plea, a cry for understanding, for connection. But why here? Why now? And most importantly, what was it trying to tell them? The answer, Emily knew, was just beyond reach. But she also knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Emily couldn't shake the questions swirling in her mind. As the lion rested, surrounded by curious staff and patients, she noticed something peculiar. Around its neck, hidden beneath its thick mane, was a leather collar, worn, frayed, and almost invisible against its golden fur. "What's this?" she whispered, carefully reaching out. Her fingers brushed the edge of the collar, and to her surprise, there was a small metal tag attached. It was scratched and weathered, but the faint engraving was still legible. It read, "Kumba, protect and serve." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Protect and serve. This lion wasn't wild. It had belonged to someone. But who? And why had it come here in such a desperate state? She stood, her mind racing, and turned to the gathered crowd. "Does anyone recognize this? Has anyone seen or heard of a lion named Kumba?" A few murmurs rippled through the group, but no one had an answer. The hospital administrator frowned, stepping closer to inspect the tag. "This must mean it was trained," he said. "But for what purpose? And how did it end up here?" Emily stared at Kumba, her chest tightening. The lion wasn't just seeking help, it had been on a mission. But to find what? Or whom? The sound of a distant siren interrupted her thoughts. Animal control was finally on their way, but Emily felt a pang of dread. Would they see Kumba as a creature to be saved, or a threat to be removed? Time was running out, and Emily knew she had to uncover the truth before it was too late. Kumba hadn't chosen their hospital by accident. And whatever the reason, it was up to her to find it. The sirens grew louder, their wails echoing through the hospital. Emily knelt beside Kumba, her hand resting on his mane. "What did you come here?" she whispered. His amber eyes opened, calm and trusting, as if answering her question. The tension in the room was palpable. "Emily, animal control is coming," someone said. "Not yet," she said firmly, heading to the front desk. "I need last night's security footage." The minutes later, she found it. The moment Kumba entered the hospital, he limped with purpose, dragging a small bundle in his jaws. Her heart raced. "He brought something," she said, scanning the room. Under a bench, she found the bundle. Inside was a baby, fragile and barely breathing. Gasps filled the room. Emily held the infant close. "He saved this child," she whispered. The hospital doors burst open and animal control officers stormed in. "Step away from the lion," one demanded. Emily stood tall, the baby in her arms. "This lion didn't come to hurt anyone. He's a hero." Kumba let out a low, calm rumble as the officers hesitated. Emily's voice rang steady. "If he saved a life, we owe him the same." The room waited, breaths held, as the lion's fate hung in the balance. The hospital lobby was silent, every eye fixed on Emily as she stood, cradling the baby in her arms. Kumba lay motionless but watchful, his golden mane tousled and his amber eyes calm yet commanding. The animal control officers hesitated, their tranquilizer guns lowered but still in their hands. Emily took a deep breath, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. This lion didn't come here by chance. He risked everything to bring this child to safety. He's not just an animal, he's a hero. If he saved a life, don't we owe him the same? The room seemed to hold its breath. One of the officers shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the baby in Emily's arms. Slowly, he nodded. If he's stable, we won't take him by force. But he needs care, both for his safety and everyone else's. Emily relaxed slightly but refused to step away. Not until we make sure he's okay. He didn't give up on this child, and I won't give up on him. The officers stepped back, their weapons lowered, and the tension in the room eased. Emily knelt beside Kumba again, her hand resting on his paw. He let out a low, soft rumble, not of fear, but of understanding. Hours passed as Kumba received the care he needed. Meanwhile, the baby, fragile but alive, was transferred to the neonatal unit. Doctors confirmed the child would survive, thanks to Kumba's remarkable journey. As the chaos settled, Emily stayed by the lion's side. The hospital lobby, once filled with whispers and fear, was now quiet, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. She gently stroked Kumba's mane, her voice low and steady. You saved her. You gave her a chance. You're the bravest soul I've ever met. Kumba blinked slowly, his eyes meeting hers one last time. The bond between them was unspoken yet undeniable, a connection built on trust, compassion, and shared courage. When the wildlife sanctuary team arrived to transport Kumba to a safe haven, Emily stood by him until the very end. As they lifted him carefully into the transport vehicle, he let out a final roar, a sound so powerful and resonant that it echoed through the entire hospital. It wasn't a roar of pain or fear, but one of triumph and pride, as though he was leaving a part of himself behind. Tears filled Emily's eyes as she watched the vehicle disappear down the road. Though she knew she would never see Kumba again, his legacy would live on in the life he had saved and the hearts he had touched. Years later, the hospital unveiled a bronze statue in the lobby, a majestic lion with a proud stance, its mane wild and its gaze eternal. Beneath it, a plaque read, "In honor of Kumba, who taught us the true meaning of heroism." Emily stood before the statue, her hand resting on the shoulder of a young girl. The baby Kumba had saved. The child, now vibrant and full of life, looked up at the lion's face with awe. "Is that him?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Emily nodded, a soft smile breaking through her tears. "That's Kumba, the bravest soul I've ever known." As they stood together, the sun streaming through the windows, it felt as though Kumba's spirit lingered, a timeless reminder that courage and love know no boundaries, and heroes can come in the most unexpected forms.